Hey everyone, this is Anthony here as one of the co-hosts of Phenomenon, a paranormal podcast. If you're listening to this episode, you may have noticed that we've been gone for a while. That is because we had some personal family stuff that we were dealing with for the last couple months, but we are back. But before we can jump into our new batch of episodes that we are hard at work on behind the scenes, we thought we'd share with you an episode we recorded before we went on break. So this is an old episode in which we discuss classic versus modern techniques of communicating with spirits or energies, whatever you may want to call them. Hope you guys will enjoy this conversation, and we'll see you soon with a brand new batch of episodes for Season 2 of Phenomenon, a paranormal podcast. And don't forget, don't fear the unknown. Welcome to Phenomenon, a paranormal podcast. Don't fear the unknown.
Hey everyone, this is Christina and
Anthony.
And welcome back to the Phenomenon, a paranormal podcast. Thank you guys for sticking around. I know we've been MIA for the past few weeks, but we are back, and we just wanted to jump in and do a quick episode right now on some ghost hunting techniques and equipment.
Yeah, we're really going to focus on communication with spirits, ghosts, entities, whatever you want to think of it, energy. The techniques have really, changed, especially with the advancement of technology.
Absolutely.
And, there's arguments to be made for both. There's arguments to be made for the classic techniques that were used to channel or communicate with spirits. But there's also a lot of positives with modern technology, of course.
Right. And I want to correct something, too, at the outset of this. I mean, we don't consider it ghost hunting, per se.
No.
We consider it paranormal investigation and communication. So we're not trying to hunt anyone down. We're not trying to force communication with anyone. We always like to make communication with energy or spirits or what have you.
Ghost hunting was definitely a very catchy thing for television.
Sure.
But I think in the long run, it makes no sense to call it ghost hunting because we really aren't hunting. We're not going to capture them, Ghostbuster style and put them in a tiny little box. We're here to talk to people. That's all.
Or assume everything is evil that we come in contact with. So I just wanted to make that correction before we go further. So one thing we, want to touch on is the differences between paranormal investigations have been going on for a very long time, but the methods have definitely changed.
Yeah. And
there are still people who believe the old methods are the best way to go.
Yeah.
But I'll let Anthony talk a little bit about the old methods and kind of where that's at and maybe anything that we've explored in that realm.
Yeah. Well, this technique, you could go all the way back to, ancient times with, whether they be witches or, prophets,
old healers.
Yeah, any kind of, religious leader or spiritual person. The technique is called seances. And there's many different kinds of seances, many different tools. But the term seance really became popular during the spiritualism movement in the 19th century. And that's what we're going to focus on today, is that kind of era. Because you can even go to the ancient Greek days and, the speakers who would come up and, make prophecies and all that. But today we're going to focus on 19th century spiritualism and the tools that they used back then. So the first one we can talk about is, of course, mediumship. And, a lot of these tools have evolved and grown into the modern day, including mediums. Mediums exist all the time. Finding the right person who is a true medium, who truly has that gift, of course, is always a challenge.
Right.
But I do believe that there is credence to that fact because We talk about how there are portions of our brain that, we don't have access to every aspect of our brain 100%. Certain areas are more active than others, and some areas will lay dormant. You just never know. Maybe there are areas of a person's brain who are mediums who are able to access a part of the world that we can't.
Right. They're more in tune. Just like, when we have children, that it has been widely known that, children sometimes can see way more than we can see, can be much more in tune to the other side. I think a lot of that, from a medical perspective, as someone who is in the medical field for many, many years, has a lot to do with the fact that children's brains are still growing and evolving for many years. And, that's why, when a child goes through some form of trauma, it can actually affect their brain growth and their brain chemistry as a result. So, to me, it stands to reason that if our brains, which are electrical conductors, can, still be growing and changing during the formative years, that, makes sense that they could, be more in tune with things from the other side, which Anthony and I very much feel is, constructive energy.
Yeah.
So, the mediumship thing, we firsthand know someone who has abilities that, can't really be explained.
Yeah.
So we've seen it in action, and there are people, I think, who have very, very strong abilities in that realm. And, you just have to find those people who are true and trustworthy.
Exactly. Because, for me personally, you could tell the certain people who kind of get into it from more of a business perspective, who see an opportunity to make some money doing this stuff. And then those people who actually do have the gift, who have the people's best intentions at heart. Because to me, mediums who really have the gift, a lot of times will kind of shy away from the public eye because it's something that makes them nervous. The person we know, they get nervous about talking about this stuff because, it's a lot to handle.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of emotions that go into it. And, if you watched our last YouTube video on our YouTube channel, you can actually see an example of this where this person that we know, this building we went to in our new state of Virginia, our home state, we'd never been to this place before. This was literally the first time we went there.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah.
You and I have one brain, because I was going to give the same example.
We could do a whole episode on the connections that, people have to one another.
Right.
The information sharing of that kind, because we always seem to be on the same page.
No, but this is a great example.
Oh, yeah, for
Go
sure.
For it. Tell it.
But, this episode, if you watch it, this building we went into, we're doing the initial walkthrough and we're filming it. And, she's already was, kind of getting vibes and hearing stuff. But we went to this one room and there was a painting there that she had a really strong feeling about. And she was in the middle of talking about that. And then as we turn in the room, she kind of gets this vibe from a corner of the room. And she starts talking about how she's seeing like a picnic. She's seeing a field and like people having a picnic. But there's nothing in the area that visually you can see in the video that should indicate that. And so off camera, you can hear us asking the owner of the place, is there anything in this corner over here or in this back room? Like that, and she doesn't specify why we're asking. And she tells us that there's a little closet in that corner that has some old equipment like picnic baskets and stuff.
Yeah.
There's no way this person could have possibly known that. We'd never been to this building before.
Nope.
Never looked through it. No, there were no pictures on the website of any picnic baskets. Nothing. So that to me is a prime example of someone who does have some sort of connection to kind of pick up on energies.
Absolutely.
Whether they're dormant energies that are kind of like a fingerprint, a memory of some sort on the environment, or maybe it is an intelligent being who wants to kind of indicate, hey, this item meant something to me.
Right.
This place meant something to me. Or I just want to be seen.
Right. And so that's why, for me, mediums can be very good to have on an investigation. You just never really know what they're going to pick up on.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is, just one example of many, many times that there have been things like this when we've been out doing investigations that she has picked up on. Even, when we did All Saints, the very first thing she felt was one of the owners. She could like literally feel someone attached to their back, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And was able to say what they look like and had a name in her head, and it matched everything. So, you know, things like, you know, intuitiveness on an investigation, I think is something that's been around for a very long time and still comes in very handy.
Channeling, I mean, and we can even, we'll touch back on this after we talk about the modern day stuff. But I think, you know, what we'll talk about in the end is how these two, the modern and the old stuff, can kind of lead to new creations. And I have an example using this person that we've just been talking about of how that happened. But we'll get into that at the end of the episode.
Right.
Some other techniques during the spiritualism movement that came up were, of course, spirit boards.
Oh, yeah.
And that's another thing that has lasted even into this era that we're interested in exploring how we can, you know, modernize it. But spirit boards have been around forever. And if you're not familiar with this, another name for it is, of course, Ouija boards.
Yeah, there's also like straight up Ouija boards, and then there's spirit boards that were developed by actual like mediums and people communicating in a much more like, I don't know, advanced sort of way.
Yeah.
Similar to what you would see like on a pendulum mat, things like that, which we'll also talk about.
I mean, I'm doing the actual research here, so I'm going to say the exact thing. They're spirit boards, also known as talking boards or Ouija boards, are flat tablets that typically made of wood, masonite, chipboard, or plastic. On the board are a number of symbols, pictures, letters, numbers, and or words. The board is accompanied by a planchette, French for little board, and which can take the form of a pointer on 3 legs or magnifying glass on legs. People make homemade boards themselves. Others can be bought in stores. Obviously, there's the well-known Ouija board that Hasbro developed later in life as a toy for kids. But the spirit board originally was created during the spiritualism movement as a means of either mediums or regular people communicating with the dead or with spirits, energies, whatever you want to think of them as.
Right.
But basically, the idea is that you are a conduit for this energy. And by placing your fingers with everyone else on the planchette, the energy can be channeled through you to allow the planchette to move.
Right.
And I think that's the key difference here. I think that there's always that expectation of, oh, you're moving it. You're moving the planchette. You're doing it. Oh, you are. But I think that there's kind of a cool concept to think about it, less in terms of that and more of like energy conducting through us.
Right.
And not the board. The board isn't magic. The board is definitely not evil.
No.
We are conduits for energy all the time. We are literally made of energy.
Right.
And our brain is literally a supercomputer conducting energy and electricity all the time.
Well, I think, too, a lot of the thing with the Ouija board goes to what your belief is going into using it.
Yeah.
Because if you are someone who believes I'm not going to lie, a lot of people believe this is truly an evil thing.
Oh, yeah.
You should not ever use it because you can invite demons in and you have to close it a certain way. And if you don't, you have to pretty much burn it, disintegrate it, or you're going to be just followed by this demon forever. If that's your mindset going into it, I mean, we tend to draw in negative energies, not demons, but negative things ourselves a lot of the time. And also, too, I think that the whole movement of the planchette and all of that, I mean, I'm going to just say that for the way I look at it, if you're in a very active place where whatever is there has an ability to move something or to give their energy through you or whatever it may be, I think it depends on where you are and what kind of activity they're having, you know, because you could take the same Ouija board to 5 different places and have completely different experiences.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but, you know, we've used one because what we do is we experiment on things, especially things that we don't necessarily fully give a lot of credence to.
I can name one right now that we've been using lately that I never in a million years would have thought to use, the dowsing rods.
The dowsing rods,
and
absolutely.
That's another old form of communication that has been used, but you see it all the time on YouTube videos and stuff. In my years, every time I've seen a dowsing rod video, I have always rolled my eyes because in my head, naturally a person's hands will shake or
Right.
you'll move. A slight little movement will cause the things to move.
Yeah.
But interesting enough, Christina can attest to this. She actually felt it. She actually felt the metal part of the dowsing rods.
Yes.
The lift out of the wood handles.
Right.
Lift and move. Not that they were just spinning on their own like
Right.
they normally would.
No, and not just slightly move. We're talking about a full lift up and shoot over to one direction in response to a specific question.
Yeah.
So, I mean, more than once. But now, at the same time, I will say that it's kind of to me like other things that we've used. Different people, like on an investigation, may have better luck with one piece of equipment, and another person uses that same piece of equipment and they don't have that same result.
Yeah.
For me, I've had results with the dowsing rods I would have never expected.
Yeah.
Because we got at it simply as a form of debunking their use.
Yeah.
So to have that experience was very, very interesting.
Oh, yeah.
And yet, Anthony used them and he got some, but not what I got. So
yeah,
who knows?
I didn't feel the vibration, energy the way she did.
Right.
I think it's true. Everyone has their specialty. Everyone has that piece of equipment.
Right.
Whether it be old or new, that they kind of drawn to. I've been interested in tarot recently. Tarot is really interesting to me.
Right.
Not necessarily as it's literally going to predict the exact future that you have, but it's more of a guide.
Right.
And more of like, here's things to look for kind of thing.
Right.
And I think that's interesting to think about energy being drawn through the simple cards. But, back to the spirit board stuff, I mean, it's true. It really is about intention. Like, if you really believe that something is going to bring a demon, we've talked about this in recent episodes of the podcast, even thought form hauntings.
Exactly.
If you expect a demon to come forth, a demon will come forth. Not because it's a real demon, because you're putting all of that fear and anxiety and negativity into a space.
Right.
Into an object, even with the Ouija board.
Yeah.
If you're looking at a Ouija board and thinking this board is going to bring a demon forth, you're going to get a negative response.
I agree with you 100%. And two, again, it's like anything. What is your mindset going into it? If you're somebody who is very spiritual and religious, let's say, and you've grown up your whole life, believing very firmly in demons,
right?
And not in daemons, which is a different thing altogether.
Yeah, very different.
Very
Demons
different.
or daemons are very different.
Okay, so if you're someone who believes in heaven and hell and God and the devil and demons, then your mindset using something that can, what people think, open a door to let all this in, I mean, you're going to be paranoid about that from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I see this all the time in paranormal groups, so, I think intention is important. And what, if you, for the life of me, if that's what your belief system is, I don't know why you'd even remotely want to dive into something like that and then end up later saying, "Oh my God, I need to close this. I don't know what."
Whenever we watch paranormal shows, especially the ones where they recreate things, and someone comes on who supposedly had an experience and they're religious, and they're talking about how religious they are, but then they talk about how they use a Ouija board, and I'm like, doesn't that kind of like go against what you're thinking? Like, if you're really that afraid that a demon is going to come through, why use it?
I know, exactly. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No. I mean, if you're looking at it more as a game, that's one thing, but then look at it as a game.
Yeah.
Intention. Intention is everything.
Absolutely. And so, again, between the spirit boards, mediums, dowsing rods, pendulums, which are very similar to, using a spirit board, except you're using a pendulum other than not a planchette to guide you to different letters and words and things. Yeah. I mean, all of this is channeling and, an older form of communication than what you'll see on a lot of the paranormal shows now, which is, technical equipment. Yeah. And it's always, there's one group I belong to where the conversation is always tech versus intuition.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that there has to be one or the other. I think you can marry the two And I think it's smart to marry the two because one can back up the other.
Yeah.
We use the spirit box quite often. There are some people who absolutely hate the spirit box.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Don't believe that you're actually communicating. I mean, we've recorded enough stuff that leaves no doubt in my mind that it is a form and a way to communicate with energy that's out there.
If it was just personal stuff, I could see how people could be skeptical.
Sure, of course.
But we have captured things on camera or on recordings of things that in a million years we never would have thought to ask for.
Right.
And they range from really happy things, really fun things from people that you get to communicate with.
Right.
To some really chilling stuff. Things that
chilling.
We never would have thought of because, part of what our interests are or things that we look at are missing persons cases.
Right.
The area we used to live in the high desert of California is rife with missing people who sadly don't ever get the attention they deserve. Yeah. And so when we are in that area and that stuff is happening around us, it kind of becomes second nature, sadly, that, that's kind of in the background. It's a fact of life.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but it happens so often in places like that it's hard to keep up with how many people go missing. Mm-hmm. And then we'll be doing a spirit box session and not thinking about that at all, trying to talk to maybe our grandparents, my grandparents, her parents.
Right.
And just kind of like having a decent time. And all of a sudden, a voice comes up saying they're missing person.
Right.
Very clearly, there was one night we were talking and we were getting snippets of what we think was their last night.
The whole experience of what happened and being pulled over by people who were pretending to be police officers.
We heard the wind rushing through the desert, which is a very specific sound. If you've ever been into the high desert and you go out there in the middle of the night, there's a very specific sound of the wind like really rushing through the area you're in.
Right.
And we heard it on the spirit box.
Oh yeah, and we heard some like really detailed description of things that sounded very like somebody being abducted and held somewhere. And we even had down the street from our house that we just moved from, literally around the corner, maybe 5 houses down, a double murder happened. Well, 2 people murdered 6 months apart in the same apartments.
And weren't they the same family?
They were the same family. They were cousins. Yeah. And we literally, in trying to connect with them, heard a whole scenario of them being told to get on the ground and put their hands up.
Didn't we capture that gunshot too?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
that's exactly how they died. So, when people, debunk a certain piece of equipment, it's kind of like us. We don't immediately say 100% dowsing rods could never work.
No.
We want to test that out. And again, if someone's used a piece of equipment briefly and they don't have a good result, you're not always going to get a result on every piece of equipment. Just like you're not always going to go out and catch EVPs.
Yeah, that's a big one we always talk about.
Yeah, because you won't see that on the paranormal shows. Every time they go for an EVP, they get a very clear EVP.
What they don't show you or tell you, because the executives of shows really don't want to spend the time talking about it.
Right.
Is they spend days investigating before they even get that one piece of
evidence,
audio.
Right.
It takes so long and so many hours of recording and not getting anything before that comes up.
Yeah.
That people will get the wrong idea. Like, if I go out and record, I'm going to get something right away.
Right away. It's really easy. Look at such does it. I can do it, but it. Yeah.
Literally, I was recording randomly in my grandfather's old house years ago.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even recording for just that. I was just recording, for myself. And in the background, you hear my grandfather's impatient whistle that my mother grew up with listening to all the time. That was his specific whistle when he was ready to go somewhere or ready to talk to someone or do something.
Yeah.
And it heard it.
Very cool. We have it recorded.
Yeah. That's a rarity, though.
Absolutely. It doesn't, to me, when you're trying to get EVPs, is the hardest time to get them. A lot of the times it's accidental.
Yeah.
So that's the whole thing. Whether it's a handheld recorder, or some have better quality than others. There's a creme de la creme digital recorder by Panasonic that's very hard to find anymore. And if you do find it, it's ridiculously priced because everyone wants one.
Yeah.
But most people who go out and are trying to catch EVPs do not have that recorder.
Yeah.
So it's all that much harder to get a really good clear one.
Yeah.
So, the spirit box, there's so many different pieces of tech now that are used on investigations. But I think it's interesting to see what people come up with tech that wasn't thought of before, and it's always fun to try it out. There's a music box.
That's exactly what I was thinking right now.
That we constantly have been talking about wanting to try, but again, not cheap, and you could spend all your earnings on paranormal equipment in a heartbeat. So that's the next thing that we're going to be looking at, and we finally have REM pods, and there's the laser grid, which we have a smaller version of one that we have caught some stuff on ourselves.
We've seen people move
through it,
so it's interesting.
These things all just kind of marry together, though, along with the old ways to find the best amount of clear evidence that you can find.
I think our world is going through a lot of changes recently. A lot of upheaval, but a lot of also big change.
Yeah.
And I think that whatever we want to call it, spirits, the universe, the ancients, whatever you want to think of it as, I think something wants something new. And I think the best way to do that is to marry the old ways with the new ways. And 2 examples I can give you. One, if we always talk about them because big inspiration, but Hellier.
Yeah.
One thing piece of equipment they used in season 2 was called the God Helmet.
Oh yeah.
Which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Because it pours this, what is it called? In this kind of energy into your brain.
Into your neurons in your brain, yeah.
And the interesting thing is the energy they're using is stuff that is naturally found in very prominent religious sites.
Right.
You can even look at, I'm curious, but where the old Oracle of Delphi in Greek mythology,
right? She
was very infamous, and it was a real person.
Right.
The Oracle of Delphi was supposed to be really famous for having these premonitions of things. But, you look at, very famous places in Jerusalem, Israel, there's high levels of EMF,
right?
Different kinds of energy that give a person in their brain a sense of euphoria, of godhood.
Right, a religious experience.
Yeah.
Right.
They're supposed to be opening your mind, in other words. And so they created a helmet to mimic that.
Right.
So they're combining old ways of natural stuff happening around in certain places of the world with a piece of technology.
And this technology was developed by scientists who are studying the brain.
Yeah.
This wasn't developed for paranormal investigations.
No.
This was actually, I think, a college professor and scientist, and I may be wrong, but I believe that that's what it is. We'll put the information if we can find it down there of who created it.
Yeah.
And it was for the purpose of seeing if they could recreate a religious experience like that by stimulating certain areas of the brain.
Yeah.
So when this helmet, which looks ridiculous.
Oh, it looks totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
The original, I'm going to say, they updated it for the show.
Yeah.
But the original helmet they had was literally an old baseball helmet.
Yes.
With electrodes on it.
Mm-hmm.
But,
all over it.
The interesting is the Greg Newkirk, he doesn't use it very often because the one time he did use it, had a very profound experience where he saw himself in the future.
Right.
And his future self saw him back. And they recognize each other in the moment of some sort of experiment they were doing.
It's a big no-no in the space-time
continuum. Yeah, right? It's like the universe could have imploded at that point.
Right.
But it's an interesting thing to see, like, something new was created.
Right.
And another example, I think, of combining the old and the new, the person we were talking about earlier, the person on our investigation.
Yeah.
She naturally has a gift. She can naturally see and hear things that we cannot. But she also is very proficient in the Estes method.
Yes.
She uses the spirit box with headphones and noise-canceling headphones and a blindfold. And not only is she able to hear entire conversations with people using this, she has seen things that defy logic. She has seen people in the woods in the middle of the night who turn around and spot her
and
as if she's there.
Directly at her.
Yeah, as if she's not, if they know she's there and she's not supposed to be seeing what they're doing.
Right.
She has seen my grandparents in an entirely new place in a place of just pure light. She has seen, people in the 1950s, a woman in her like mid-30s, red dress, sitting in a room crying, and she has no idea why.
Yeah.
I mean, she sees so much that like comes out of nowhere. It's not nowhere that she should be able to see.
Yeah.
And there's been times where she's seen stuff that we've been able to research and confirm.
Oh, yeah.
It's so fascinating. And that's an example of combining the old and the new. She uses her natural gift that she already has and pairs it with a piece of technology like that is emitting white noise.
Right.
And her gift allows her to see and hear through that white noise so clearly that the spirits all come rushing to her so loudly that they're constantly trying to get her attention.
Yeah.
That's how strong she is.
She's very strong. I mean, and not everyone can see things when they're doing that method, but, she's very in tune.
Yeah.
So she's always been able to, connect that way. And we've even had experiences where we're trying to communicate and we'll say, can you please show Allie an image? And she can't hear us say that.
No.
And then 2 minutes later, she'll say, I'm seeing something. And it's, pretty much what we're asking for. So
the biggest example we can give too, how many times have we played notes?
Oh, many
How many times have we done bing, bing, bing together, which is again from Hellier, but we also play music. We also do different tones, different notes. And it's literally the second we stop, she goes, I'm hearing music. Or
Yeah.
I'm hearing melodies. I'm hearing tones.
Exactly.
But not from us. She says that it's happening after we stop doing the tones.
Right.
So it's almost as if it's a call and response thing.
Exactly.
Which is, to me, it's so fascinating that we're hearing that show. All of a sudden, I'm hearing German music.
Yeah.
And you're like, wait, what? Because she's on the AM bandwidth.
Right.
There's not a place for a lot of music. It's more talk radio stuff. So
Right.
you're like, what is she hearing?
Yeah, it's very interesting working with all these different, forms of communication. And even, you see the Ovilus used a lot on shows. And, we have our spirit talker that we use, which is essentially the same thing.
Yeah.
That we've had some corroborating responses from. And that's what we like about doing different methods, is that we can say, okay, well, we're hearing this on the spirit box, and then spirit talker is saying this, which corroborates that.
Yeah.
And, if we use some of the older methods, that just adds credence to what you're doing. So
Yeah.
I mean, we really feel like you don't have to be on either the tech side or the old school side.
Yeah.
You can
There's
put
a
everything
method
together.
to finding a path forward together. It's kind of like how we talked about how paranormal investigators can work with UFOologists
Yeah.
and cryptid researchers, cryptozoology researchers. They could all work together instead of focusing on their own one individual thing to find answers. That doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right.
Same thing with the equipment you use. A spirit box and a Ouija board could be used together,
Absolutely.
for all you know. The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
I mean, and simple things too, like on an investigation, is putting a bell in a doorway or in an area that's really active, and leaving it there. If you're hearing bells go off, you know that that's something that's being interacted with. Or for us, we had birds that we had at our last investigation that are motion censored.
Yeah.
That originally we got for our parrot to entertain him.
Yeah.
And you have to pass in front of it. And we left them upstairs at a location where there was nobody upstairs. And they went off several times during the investigation. And that's where they get footsteps walking all the time.
Yeah.
So, you have to be creative and innovative. I just had the idea that day, like, hey, let's bring the birds. And sure enough, it worked out. So
sorry about that noise, by the way.
Yeah.
We're at a location right now, and our window is not working, so the window has to be open. But yeah, it's really fascinating stuff, and I think that argument should be made to work together, to find ways of merging the two worlds together, because I think this world is ready for something new.
I agree, and we've talked about it, and we will talk more about it. We're looking to create our own, whether it's tech or tech combined with something old,
Yeah.
you might say, to, further, test the limits of how we can try and communicate and get evidence.
We're not experts. We're not experts at all.
No.
And I don't think anyone's an expert. I think the purpose of this field is to embrace the unknown.
Exactly.
And to embrace possibilities. And I think that's the best way of doing it.
Right. I agree. And we're going to keep pushing that envelope as much as we can to the best of our, limited capabilities. But we're going to, not just sit back and not try and advance the field. I guess that's the important thing, is try and advance it however we can.
Yeah.
So that's our spiel for today.
Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this little episode. We're going to be trying to get back into the groove of things here and finish out season 2 and get ready for season 3 of the podcast. So hope you guys enjoyed this week's episode. And if leave us in the comments down below or in the reviews, what is your favorite way of investigating? What kind of tool or piece of equipment or method do you enjoy when you go on an investigation?
Right. If there are things that we didn't mention, throw it our way. We're always, interested in learning new things, or, just trying to put together like the best possible toolkit, if you will, to go out there and investigate. Because we have some places that we're going to be going now that hopefully things have calmed down a little bit with this latest Omicron variant. And also with us having the Omicron variant and getting better. So we got to get out there and do some live investigations for everybody. So that's our plan. All right, everybody. Thank you again for listening, and stay tuned.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
You've been listening to Phenomenon, a paranormal podcast. My co-host Christina and I want to thank you for listening to this week's episode. Are you experiencing the paranormal? Have you seen a UFO in the sky? Do you think Bigfoot's digging around in your trash can at night? If you have a story to tell us, feel free to email us at the email in the description below, or you can follow us and send us a message on our social media pages. And if you'd like to have your story featured on our podcast, we'd be happy to tell it. Either you can send in an audio recording of yourself telling the story, or we can read the story for you as you have written it. Either way, we'd be happy to share your story. There's a lot of weird things in this world, and there are plenty of stories to be told. So don't forget, don't fear the unknown. Have a pleasant week, everyone.